Hello, you're very welcome back to the Matchbook NFL Podcast. It's week 7, and before we get into week 7, I'll introduce Drew, Judah, and Sam here, but maybe start with you, Drew. I always like starting to the most experienced man first. Week 6, aside from M&F, but as I said off air, that's the Chargers' fault, so that's no one bears responsibility for some poor Staley calls, Justin Herbert not looking at himself, that sort of thing. I'm over it, as you can see. But Drew, week 6, 3 out of 3 in the long shots, 3 out of 3 in best bets. Winners across the card. In fairness, was a good week.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No. That was that's how you draw them up. That's what you want. Sides in particular coming through in spades last week was awesome. You mentioned the only one that really, and I guess it always does kind of humble you, I think, to lose a Monday Night Football game, standalone game. You know, it's like it hasn't felt good. Losing the Giants earlier this season against the Seahawks was obviously a very wrong call, and that one stuck with me for a while. And the Chargers one's going to stick with me just because I feel like I got duped by believing in a Brandon Staley-led defense to stop the Cowboys. That final drive, and I guess, you know, if anyone can rewatch the all 22 and tell me where exactly the penalty on 3rd and 1,000,000 was that gave that helped kind of extend that Dallas Cowboys drive at the beginning of that final drive, I'd love to know where it was, because I've been looking for it. And, you know, they called 2 defensive holdings. They picked one up, which was clearly a mistaken thrown flag, and then the other one they changed to illegal contact, and I guess maybe he was outside of 5 yards, but it was pretty ticky-tack. And all that said, that entire final drive where the Chargers defense couldn't get off the field with consistent 3rd and long that they were gifted was rough. You know, classic, the, you know, fourth down stop in the goal line for them on the first drive of the second half was rough. But overall, I'm you know, pretty psyched with our prognosticating for week 6. And you know, it took a little luck though. Browns winning, that was lucky.
Well, that's the long shots, Drew. It's the second time you got a bit of luck in the long shots. But
yeah, I got a terrible price too.
They drifted.
Yeah. I think that closed in like the $4 range, and here I am playing into it at $3.40. So not great. But ultimately, you know, I think the handicap was solid, and, you know, sometimes the market goes against you and you got to double down. And, you know, I'm happy that ultimately that was a missed field goal at the end, because that would have been a bummer to have a decent read on that game, but not get the money line home.
Yeah. No, it was a pretty decent red zone, I thought, overall, outside of the betting in terms of 1-score games, that sort of thing. Judah, some good winners across the card. What's your highlight of the week? Because we spent enough time talking about the Chargers there with Drew. What was your highlight of last week's action?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's like I feel like I avoided all the mess. Like, NFL was an extremely messy week last week with the Browns, with the Bills, and honestly, like, the Dolphins looked kind of messy too to start with, going down 14-0. I'm happy I got lucky. Ended up on the right games that kind of played out semi-normally.
Yeah, you know what? It actually crossed my mind watching Red Zone going, I've actually avoided this mess here. Dolphins, you said 14-0 down, -14 they were, and then people ended up covering on that bet. Just blows my mind, to be honest, and quite easily as well in the end. Sam, what was your highlight? Obviously, we had the London game, the 3rd of the series. Be sad not having those early kickoffs, but some decent winners in the card, and your best bet came up as well.
Yeah, I had a good day personally. I think I went 5-2. Still got criticism though, because for one game I didn't make a pick at all, and still got called out for that. So Chargers. Yeah, you win some, you lose some, and even when you don't pick, you end up losing some. So there we go. But no, I'm looking forward to this week. I think there's a lot of exciting games, a lot of games that kind of concern me as well. But yeah, there's a lot to look forward to, I think.
Yeah, no, really looking forward to this week, guys. If you are watching on the YouTube, hit that like button, leave a comment on what you think is your best bet. Well, any questions for the guys, we'll try to get to it before the end of the show. And if you're following on your podcast preferred platform, do click that follow button and leave a preferential review. Be much appreciated from all the guys. We will get to the 4 games. To be honest, they're quite decent, I think. Lions at Ravens, Chargers at Chiefs, Dolphins at Eagles, Sunday Night Football, and 49ers at the Vikings is Monday Night Football, plus any other bets, long shots, as I touched on, 3 out of 3, and then the best bet section. So Lions at Ravens is a 6 o'clock start in the UK and Ireland. We'll take a look at the betting that we currently have a Matchbook Betting Exchange. Some good liabilities already when we're recording on Wednesday afternoon. The Lions 2.32, Ravens 1.69 favorites here. The Lions are getting a 3-point head start at 187. The total for this one is 42.0, shaded a bit towards the under. So Judah, take it away on this one. Obviously, the Lions came up trumps last week, and to be honest, it was hard not to be impressed by Lions. That was a good spot for them. My question to you is this also a good spot to them this weekend?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is kind of a two-sided bet for me, which is I want to be fading the Ravens and buying the Lions. The Lions I'm currently see as like the 9th or 10th best team in the NFL. My numbers at this point, we've seen this for close to a year and a half now of the Lions offense being a top 5 unit. I think the kind of scheme mismatches that they are able to create has allowed for this, and I think is particularly magnified in this matchup against the Ravens, who I think have had a lot of success, particularly because their defensive coordinator has been able to scheme up some great game plans. Like this Ravens defensive line doesn't have the most talent. A lot of their coming into the season, their defensive line, their Odafo Owe, who's hurt right now, led the team in pressure rate, and he was like 130th among qualifying defensive players last year. I think a lot of that in the Ravens' success is scheme related. And I think Ben Johnson and the Lions offense can kind of overtake that. The main question here, I think, is the wind. It's currently projected at about 20 miles per hour. Most of the research suggests that this is like maybe the range where it starts to influence deep passing. The Lions offense is not built on deep passing. It's a lot of kind of crossing patterns, which are 10 to 15 yards down the field. Jared Goff has an ADOT of around 6.3. It's not exactly a downfield passing attack. I don't think the wind is going to influence this passing game so much. If anything, it's going to influence the kicking game at about 20 miles per hour, as we saw in the San Francisco-Cleveland game last week. That, if anything, would hurt the Ravens, who obviously have Justin Tucker. And those 50-yard field goals may not be an opportunity to in this game. But all that is to say, I think this is just a material mispricing. The Ravens, by my numbers, are a middle of the pack team. I think they've been propped up by facing CJ Stroud in his first game, DTR, basically the easiest set of quarterbacks you can possibly face. I think this is going to be a major test with Jared Goff and the Lions. They're healthy at their skill position. Jameson Williams seems back. That adds another dimension to the offense. Josh Reynolds and Amon-Ra St. Brown have been great. Sam Laporta seems healthy. Sure, David Montgomery's out. I think Jahmyr Gibbs, who will likely return, can step in and play that role fine. I have enough data at this point to suggest that the Lions are going to be, at the very, very least, a top 10, probably a top 5 offense. I'm not at all scared by the Ravens. I think it's a lot of the matchups they've faced have kind of propped up their defensive numbers. I'm all over the Lions in this spot. I'm going to take them on lots of alt lines. They can put up points. Their defense has been surprising too. They stopped the run well. I think anything you can say about the matchup, about the kind of fundamentals of the team, has me on the Lions.
Okay, that's a great start to the show. Very confident shout. Sam, are you as confident on the Lions? You're probably the only one that didn't get involved with the Lions this week, although you gave them good props on the show. And as I touched on with Judah, they were phenomenal last week. And Judah reckons this is quite a decent spot on both sides.
Yeah, I agree with everything you've said 100%. The Lions, we know what they are now. They're a top 10 offense, a top 10 defense. And the Ravens, I think they're flattered, to be honest with you. I mean, there's not really much more that I can say that I think you didn't already say, Judah. But ultimately, despite the Ravens being pretty good in the passing game, or against the passing game, I do think that the Lions are just going to tear them apart ultimately. And you mentioned Jameson Williams, and sure, I don't think they're an offense that's kind of primarily looking for that deep ball, but just having him on the pitch, able to stretch the play, I think that kind of really adds something. And you saw last week, 2 receptions, 53 yards and a touchdown. He just adds a little bit of something to that offense, and just something that the defense would need to kind of really focus on. So for me, I'm not worried about the lack of David Montgomery. Jahmyr Gibbs, I think he's good. Craig Reynolds will do a job. And I think this is a terrible price, to be honest with you. I don't know. When I've looked across the board, I understand the reasons behind all the handicaps, but this is the one that I look at, and I don't really understand why it's at Ravens -2, if I'm honest with you. So for me, I've got to take the Lions on the money line straight away.
Okay, that's 2-0 for the Lions here. That's money line for Sam. Judah looking at -2.5, loves a good alternative handicap. Drew, you played a bigger price during the weekend. Just give listeners a bit of you always look at the lines. I know you have the deep dive podcast. Would you invariably play most of your bets early in the week, middle of the week, late in the week? It obviously, I guess, depended on this. And then for this particular game, do you still think Lions at 232 now is a decent price and worth backing?
Yeah, I do. Although I disagree with Judah strongly. Lions are not an 8th or 9th ranked team. They're like 6th or 7th, pretty clearly to me. But no, it's just this is. I'm not kidding. That's I think the right range for them. I would put them above a number. I mean, I don't see a ton of separation really between the Lions, the Eagles, and the Cowboys, and the fact that their strength of schedule is so much easier. Well, Lions probably your two. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was saying exactly that point. The market has them as like the 9th team, and I think they're
okay. I thought you were saying they were like 8th or 9th. I'm like, nah, I don't know, man. No, they're like clearly top 7.
So even when you agree, guys, you disagree.
Yeah.
So this is setting up to be a nice podcast.
No, but I mean, I don't know how else to deny this. The Lions are probably in the driver's seat for the 2 seed right now. They could catch the Niners for the 1 seed if the Niners have some more sloppy games. And, they're well coached, they're well schemed. And, I don't really, as far as like getting down on a play like the Lions against the Ravens, like there was a couple of, decisions about entering the market should largely, in my opinion, swirl around, can you get the stake you're looking for? And, are you trying to beat information? Because information is going to shape almost all of the market movement from Tuesday until Friday, right? If you're trying to get your bet in before, like the especially sharp players, the end bosses come in and close the market, then at that point, you're literally just, are we agreeing or disagreeing with the guys who are betting the most money? If you're trying to beat information is when you're trying to get in early. And I think the news that I was trying to beat betting the Lions early was Jahmyr Gibbs is going to go. And that's huge because it backfills a gaping question of who is going to run the football for them in the absence of David Montgomery. Also, I think the points, all the points Judah made, I agree with. I think go back and listen to it if you didn't already absorb all that. The Ravens defense is inflated by playing poor quarterback so far this season, and they can't rush the passer. They wouldn't necessarily have an opportunity, I don't think, to generate pressure against this Lions offensive line anyway, even if they were rushing the passer better. And I think the rubric for Goff kind of bringing out the worst in him in terms of performance, people just kind of point to, he's outside, he's going to stink. There's more to it than that. I mean, he has small hands. He struggles when there's weather like rain. He struggles when he's under pressure and there's rain because he's trying to make quick decisions and, get the ball out of his hands, and he struggles, grasping and throwing. I don't see any of those really being a factor in this particular instance, at least in the current weather forecast. Now, if it becomes drizzly or, something like that, or if the Ravens, Jadeveon Clowney decides he wants to have his best game as a pro, then, maybe I'm a little bit more concerned about the Lions offensive output here. But in general, love what they're doing scheme wise, love how they match up against the Ravens. And, I think the injury to Marcus Williams is going to matter. He's been one of their kind of standout players in the safety level. The integration of Jameson Williams matters, gives them a little bit more of a dimension that you have to be respectful for in terms of downfield speed, even if they're not going to like repeatedly target him. Just having that presence matters. The way that they've integrated Sam Laporta already into this offense is pretty awesome, and kind of making everybody who passed on Sam Porter look pretty stupid, because there's a lot of teams that could really benefit from that type of player right now. Nothing bad to say about the Lions here. I think they're the money line play, even at 132. My fair price here is close to a pick 'em. I think if I kind of project Marcus Williams out and Jahmyr Gibbs in with 100% small favorite in this spot.
Okay, agreement across the panel here on the Lions. Currently 232. Interesting to see what that closes on Sunday evening UK time. That is, obviously. We'll go to the second game. Would have loved to not talk about the Chargers this week, but divisional matchup with the Chiefs unfortunately means contractually obliged to put this in the top 4 slot. The Chargers 3.1, Chiefs 147. We'll get to you, Drew, there. the head. The Chargers 5-point head start at currently 199, and the total for this is 48.5. Shaded a bit towards the under, and on that total, Sam, you do like the over here, and quite like the Chargers. So you avoided the Chargers last week, although you did probably lean towards them. What were your thoughts on that Monday Night Football game? Because me, just looking at the YouTube highlights, it wasn't the Chargers lost to the Cowboys. That, of course, can happen. It was the way they performed throughout was quite disappointing on a number of areas of the football.
Yeah, it was a bit of a poor performance, but I think kind of what gives me, I'm certainly more keen on the total than I am backing the Chargers here. But the one thing that kind of gives me a little bit of a reason to back the Chargers is simply their ability, even in defeat, to kind of hang with teams and ultimately not get the job done. 3 defeats this season, a combined 8 points down. They've been within 2, 3, and 3. They're always there or thereabouts, and I think Justin Herbert kind of gives you that ability to kind of get yourself close to teams, even when you're maybe not playing at your best across the board. So for me, that's the reason I'm kind of going with them, and it's not particularly a great one. It's not particularly analytical, but ultimately, I think the Chargers are a team that kind of they manage to get close to teams, and if there's any team in the NFL that somehow lets teams get far closer than they should, I think it's the Chiefs, who just seemingly have this habit of not winning by the margin that they potentially should at times. But in terms of the points total, currently stands at 48.5. I'm taking the over on that all day. We know they're both good offenses. Chargers 7th in terms of points per game with 25.4, and Chiefs 9th with 24.5. And I think that doesn't really describe the potential that I'd say both of them have on any given Sunday to kind of really pop off and do well. And the kind of thing that makes me more confident in backing the over is the defenses, and ultimately the kind of ability of both defenses. And Chargers D, we know they're not particularly great this season, not really what we hoped. They're allowing 24.8 points per game. That's, not particularly good. But the Chiefs, they actually rank second in terms of least points allowed per game, which is 14.7. But I think in no way am I calling them a fraudulent defense whatsoever. But I do think those numbers are slightly unfair. And if you look at defensive DVA, that has them at 9th. And I personally probably put them slightly outside of 10 to 12, maybe in my own kind of defensive rankings. But I think these are one bad defense, one reasonably good defense, not great defense, and 2 very, very good offenses. So for me, I just think it's going to be a bit of a shootout. Chiefs win, but I think the Chargers will probably just be there or thereabouts within sort of 3 or 4 points of them.
Okay, over 48.5, the selection for Sam there. And look, Drew, if there is a team that loves losing by a score, Sam alluded to, not just this season, but for the last 5 or 6 years in particular, it is the Chargers. For you, though, it is Chiefs minus 5.5 for a pass. Just give me your thoughts going into the Chargers game on Monday Night Football and where you stand currently with the team.
Sam basically described every Chargers-Chiefs game of my lifetime that I can remember. It always feels like it comes down to a higher who can have the ball last and score the final field goal, and we've seen a lot of shootouts between these teams for sure. The one Chargers game that they beat the Chiefs with Anthony Lynn and like 28-27 with I think they got a 2-point conversion at the end. That was the only one that was like the outlier, I guess, of the pack. Anyway, this particular matchup I think is interesting largely because the Chiefs defense that they are bringing into this contest is not the Chiefs defenses of old. Usually the regular season Chiefs defenses are pretty easy to push around. Usually the coverage is pretty sloppy. Usually the tackling is pretty poor. And all of those things have changed since about the final quarter of last season into the playoffs, through the playoffs, and then carrying through and seeing growth with this team through 6 weeks, particularly in the secondary. These guys are very, very good. And they're matching up against a Chargers team that desperately needed Josh Palmer to be available on Monday night to have a hope of beating the Cowboys. The fact that the wide receiving core here for the Chargers is so deficient that they're scheming up designed plays for Gerald Everett is a problem. And I think that in general, going up against now an elite secondary and, a team with an interior pass rush led by Chris Jones, I think this sets up fairly well for the Chiefs defense to keep the Chargers, kind of in the vein we've seen from them in the last handful of years where they're just struggling. The Chargers, in my opinion, are a pretty incomplete project. The defense scheming is maybe the most concerning about what you're seeing, considering the fact that they have a defensive head coach and they've invested so much on that side of the ball. Completely giving up on JC Jackson was that was a red flag. The fact that has put some of these secondary players, move them up the chain in terms of roles and responsibilities, has been a huge problem. Michael Davis was so wildly overmatched on Monday night. I'm not saying that he has a particularly tough matchup against this Chiefs wide receiving core, which is weak. But certainly, the fact that you can particularly pick on one guy and this in a weak link system is a problem. I would say that the Chiefs offensive line can do a good enough job of stopping Khalil Mack, and really there's no one else creating any type of winning on the defensive line for the Chargers these days. So it's a pretty straightforward proposition, in my opinion, to scheme a way to really sustain drives against this Chargers team. And so Pat Mahomes and company, healthy Travis Kelce, 10 days to prepare for this game. Extremely high leverage game in terms of basically an early lockup of their division. I think you see a positive Z-score performance here from Chiefs offense and defense. And so if I was going to bet this game, I would only look to lay Kansas City. And I think this is going to get to 6 at the close. So if you have an appetite for Kansas City, I think you need to fire before we get to Friday, Saturday time window.
Okay. As Drew alluded to, Chiefs -5, 192. To be honest, as Chargers inclined, I am leaning towards the Chiefs. I don't think it's a good spot here at all. Judah, it's a live bet for you. So just give people a little bit of an insight into what your thinking is for maybe people that want to maybe see how the first couple of drives go.
Yeah, I think it's kind of rooted in, I don't really know what to make of either of these teams. I think the Chiefs price right now kind of builds in a lot of what they've done in the past. And I would be the first to tell you I'm, as bullish as the Chiefs as anyone else, but I think their on-field production this year has not been as good as, this 5.5 would suggest. I think also the Chargers game, especially if we're reacting to the Monday night game, was a combination of really two things. One, I think that Justin Herbert was bad. And I think that was kind of a rare scenario, and that happens. Zach Wilson also outplayed Patrick Mahomes on Sunday Night Football, primetime. Everyone was watching. This happens in the NFL. I don't think it's worth overreacting to. And the second part is I think that the Dallas pass rush was really, really terrific, and Herbert could not have anything downfield. He didn't take sacks. He was pressured 21 times, so that's kind of Herbert is terrific at evading pressure and still making plays. But all of that is to say, I don't really know. I don't have a good feel of how this game is going to go. Are we going to get the Chiefs offense of the past 4 years, or the Bears game? Are we going to get the Chiefs offense that played on Thursday Night Football that was atrocious against the Broncos? I don't really know. Are we going to get the elite Herbert? Maybe, but I kind of want to see the game and the game script play out before I do that, which is what's driving me to bet live. And the other thing I'll say is I always like to bet live in sort of these spots, as Sam alluded to, of just really good offenses that can score. Because you can kind of pick up little points of volatility where a line moves, but this 48.5 total could absolutely fly over that if we kind of get these two quarterbacks playing at their best. We've seen this game before. I'd rather just kind of see it as it develops rather than try and guess how each team's going to come out.
Yeah.
Got a quick question for Judah. There's a narrative out there that the Chiefs only pull out the good plays for certain matchups. Do you buy into that? And would you expect, if yes, isn't this one of those games?
I semi buy into that narrative. I'm not sure if this is one of those games. For all we know, the Chiefs, if we're going into this kind of mind game, the Chiefs have a pretty big lead in the division as it is. Maybe they're saving it for the playoffs. Granted, I think especially the play calling on 4th and shorts has been absolutely awful the past couple of weeks for the Chiefs. And it's also been on national television. But all of that is to say, I think that's kind of margin points here, where it's ultimately this is going to come down to how well Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes are playing. And I think that play calling maybe will, decide a couple of 4th downs on the margin. But if we're already in that game script, it's already pretty revealing of the way the game's going to go.
Yeah.
Perfect. I presume this is the Sky Sports game at 9:25. Chargers at Chiefs. It's Chiefs or pass for Drew, so not quite fully there with the bet, and but Sam is at over 48.5, and that total could fly. Perhaps maybe due to looking at the live in place, seeing how those first couple of drives go. We will go to Sunday Night Football here and probably game of the week here, and take a look at the betting that we have at Matchbook.com. The Dolphins 222. You feel this is a massive game for the Dolphins here now after the Bills a couple of weeks ago. Eagles 1-8. The point spread sees Dolphins get a 2.5 point head start. The total is 51.0. Drew, back to you on this. I know you played 199 earlier in the week. It's now been bet in on the Eagles, that is. Set this game up for us and why you're probably still leaning towards Philly here as well.
Yeah, I've gone back and forth on this one a couple times, so this is not going to be an especially confident take for me, but it's an important game, and I do think there is a small edge to be had on the home team, and some of it is counting on the fact that Philadelphia is an absolutely hellacious place to go and play a primetime game, and this is a wild step up from what the Dolphins have been playing in recent weeks, where they basically got to, dink around against the Giants, win and cover. Dink around against the Panthers, win and cover. Now you have to go into the Lincoln primetime and perform against, last year's Super Bowl runner-up. This is maybe the Dolphins have, some specific stuff up their sleeve that we haven't seen already this year that can really help, just put a hurting on a team that I think is probably a hair overrated broadly, but not overrated in this spot, considering this is, again, a home primetime game. But the injury situation is pretty interesting here for me, largely on the side of the Eagles. I think they basically elected to use caution with a couple of key players on the defense last week, and I think that ultimately hurt them. I would expect that both Jalen Carter and Darius Slay are available to go here. There is some question swirling around Reed Blankenship, and normally that wouldn't necessarily move the needle for me, but they are very, very lean in the safety, safety area of the field right now. So it's pretty clear that there's a glaring weakness in the secondary for the Eagles, and the fact that they're up against the Dolphins team that has game-breaking speed in the form of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle is scary. But I think that the singular matchup of the Eagles defensive line at full strength against the Dolphins O-line that I think has benefited from some relatively weak competition so far this season is going to matter. If you can, as we saw in the Bills game, if you can generate early pressure against Tua, you can kind of combat what he has been so effective at in terms of getting the ball out of his hands early so far this season. I think the Eagles absolutely can achieve that, and that may be ultimately what keeps the Dolphins somewhat grounded here. The Eagles offense, I have expecting relatively solid performance from. Jalen Hurts and sort of what they do fits well with how the Dolphins want to defend, I think. The idea that they're going to be able to gain, have relatively high success in short yardage situations on third and short, fourth and short, I think is high likelihood in this contest, considering the way the Dolphins are rostered and the way that they have their personnel out there. And I think the Eagles in general, game-breaking talent in their wide receiver group against the Dolphins secondary that is hurting badly right now. And I think, so basically I kind of see sort of a classic game setting up where the Eagles can play with the positive game state. They can let their defensive line kind of kick into high gear and really keep the Dolphins from coming back. It's a very, very weak angle to be playing a number that's, that's around a pick 'em. But the fact that this is inside 3, considering the fact that, the Eagles have a pretty outstanding home field in this sort of spot, is what ultimately puts me on Philly.
Okay. Philly currently -2.5, as Drew alluded to. And I guess, Sam, you would agree with most of that in terms of Eagles, but perhaps you see the Dolphins causing Eagles a little bit more trouble than perhaps Drew thinks.
Do you know what? I'm going to put my hands up here. In terms of picking a winner, I simply can't. I genuinely do not know how this goes. I could wake up in the morning and there's not going to be any kind of result that surprises me here. But what I absolutely love is the points total of 52. Taking the over on that, it's the highest of the week, although it has come down slightly. I think it opened at 52.5. And ultimately, these are two very good offenses. Realistically, I think we've all seen plenty from the Dolphins this year. Doesn't really need anyone to tell you how good they are. But ultimately, these are exceptional offenses. You've got Miami putting up 37.2 points per game. The Eagles putting up 25.8 per game. And ultimately, what I think kind of really matters here is how you see the game going. And I just see this being an absolute shootout. I really do. The total of 52. I think it's going to beat that quite easily. I think we've got a very good chance of seeing both teams score 30 or more. I just really don't see anything but a shootout. Offensive DVOA, Miami are top, Eagles are 6th. Points per game, Miami top, Eagles 5th. And crucially, the Dolphins are 7th in points per game against, which I think kind of will matter here. And the Eagles are 17th in that metric, so not particularly exceptional, even if they just sneak into the top half of the NFL there. But this is just two teams they're going to go hell for leather. It's going to be high scoring, and yeah, I'm going to take the over on 52. And to be honest with you, I'm probably going to look to go a little higher, a bit closer to the day as well, when we're 100% certain what's going on in terms of personnel. So yeah, for me, over all day long.
Okay, yeah, over 52.0206. Judah, look, Drew obviously thinks the Eagles. Sam thinks it'll be a shootout. Tell me why the Dolphins defense can stop this Eagles team and why you're looking at Dolphins on the alternative handicap here.
Yeah, I will say I think my alternative handicap is more based on the Miami offense. But I can start answering the question.
True, yeah.
We'll see about
leading question. Carry on.
We'll see about Lane Johnson's status. I have no idea if he's going to play or not. I'm not sure that Jalen Hurts is kind of the same quarterback if he does not trust his protection. And also, he's not a particularly good scrambler, believe it or not. If you actually look at the times he passes or gets sacked or runs, he's well below league average. He takes a ton of sacks. And he knows that he can take, 3 seconds to throw because he has a terrific offensive line behind him. If that's fractured a little bit, I think that has a major influence on the way Jalen Hurts plays and his efficiency. But to be honest, that's really not at the back of the heart of this is, Sam, I think, we talk about rankings with, offensive DVOA and all these things. It's important, I think, to just contextualize the difference between the Dolphins and everyone else right now. The main metric I use when evaluating teams is an earned drive points, essentially how sustainable, reproducible are your drives and how many points are you earning on said drives that you can kind of sustain into the future. The Dolphins are 0.6 better than the second best team. Over the course of a game, they're usually 11 drives in a game. You can do the math. That is almost like a touchdown better than the next best team. They are so much better than everyone else. And I think Drew brings up a ton of fair points about home field advantage. And, maybe there's some signal in the Buffalo game where they struggled because they couldn't hear the play calls. And maybe that does influence the offense. But at the end of the day, the NFL has decided, I think, by good offenses. And the Dolphins are so much better than anyone else. And no matchup is going to stop them. And I don't think this even sets up well for the Eagles. They're 17th in quick pressure rate, which is what I think you need. If you're getting to Tua in 2 seconds, that's important because he's throwing it in like 2.4. The secondary for the Eagles, I don't think can kind of press Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. They certainly don't have the talent, even if they are all healthy. Josh Jobe is maybe the worst corner by my separation numbers. I just don't see this as a spot in which the Eagles are going to stop them at all. If you look at the Dolphins rushing attack, if you build a model which says, the expectation of what a running back will get on a given play, more so than the over-expected that the Dolphins running backs are getting, which Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane, when he was healthy, were certainly atop the league there. The expectation for the Dolphins rushing attack was like 6.5 yards per carry, which I think points to the scheme. I think that's going to win over the Eagles front, which has been terrific stopping the run. I think it gives the Dolphins many ways to win. If anything, that can also kind of help mitigate the pass rush if they have a successful run game. I just don't see how this Eagles team is going to stop the Dolphins. I don't think anyone can stop the Dolphins so long as they're healthy. And I'm willing to put up the points because I'm not so sure that the Eagles, especially if they're in a negative game script, can kind of hang on. I just see this as the Eagles are going, the Dolphins, I think, are going to score 30 plus points. And I'm not so sure the Eagles are going to be able to keep up. And if the market's pricing in the home field, if the market's pricing in any, defensive advantage, I just want to fade that because I'm all over this Dolphins offense. And I'm going to be betting them as long as the market is not clearly putting them as by far the number one offense.
This is a fun conversation, and I like all those points. I will just say that the Dolphins, and again, we only have 6 games, so but this is what it comes down to when you're trying to evaluate data and bet the NFL. The Dolphins, the Broncos, particularly in the state when they played them, the Panthers and the Giants, 3 horrific run defenses. And I don't know if the data is saying that because they all happen to have played the Dolphins, or if the Dolphins are, in some ways kind of elevated by, the weakness of their competition so far. But I also kind of feel like you've had some relatively comfortable game states. In your road games, you were largely, there was goodish weather, warmish weather, and now you got to go play at night in the colder weather in a really hostile environment. For what it's worth, since kind of in the Peterson and era and beyond for the Eagles in these primetime games, the market is missing home field adjustment by almost 2 points on average. So, there's clearly something there. And, a lot of those were, the Eagles were clearly the better team, so they were able to play with positive game state and put away games comfortably. I get that, but so I guess maybe game state is probably going to matter here pretty clearly because the points about Jalen Hurts, and again, like, not a long-term buyer in Eagles at all. Like, the Eagles feel like they could go through a stretch here in the middle of the season where they lose 5-6 games. It's not going to surprise me. But especially because, like, it does seem like the word is sort of getting out about how you stop Jalen Hurts if you can just move him off of his spot. And, kind of like, as Drew was alluding to, force him into scrambling or where he's not as good. And, what is particularly apparent is when he is fleshed out of the pocket, like, his downfield accuracy is nowhere to be seen. Like, he's more often throwing it out of bounds, I feel like, than he is accurately targeting his receivers, even when the play breaks down and the receivers have, a ton of separation. So, I do, definitely think the Eagles are not a long-term buy. But I do think that the data we've got so far this season on the Dolphins probably regresses. Probably comes back to the back in some way. And I don't know if that starts against the Eagles because, the Eagles do have a pretty weak secondary, but I think it's going to come. It should come. And, I just don't know if what I'm seeing is a function of who they've played so far this season or if it literally is this is the best offense we've ever seen in the NFL. And maybe I'm skewed also, too, because we just have had no other good offenses in the NFL this year. So it feels like even more of an outlier that's due for regression. But this is going to be a fun game to kind of help propel the narrative one way or the other on what the Dolphins offense really is, I think.
Yeah, I kind of got a quick question for you guys. What do you think we're going to see from the Eagles in terms of the amount of points they put up? Because I just look at this and the Dolphins, I think, are going to score a lot. That's for sure. But I can't look at this matchup and think we're not going to see 25 plus points for the Eagles. I don't know if you guys agree or you think it's going to be substantially less, more.
Yeah, Judah, just on that with the Dolphins defense, surely I know predominantly your angle is the Dolphins offense is better than the Eagles offense, but is that defense ultimately going to cost the Dolphins against this Eagles offense, even if they're not as strong as the Dolphins as the data suggests?
I think it really, really depends on the game script. Where if the Dolphins jump out to a big lead, which I think is pretty likely, they're also amazing on scripted drives. They're averaging like 5.5 points there. I think they'll have success if Jalen Hurts is forced to throw and they can do all the things that Drew is mentioning, especially if Lane Johnson's out and they can create pressure. I can see a game in which the Dolphins completely blow them out. I can also see the Eagles try and shorten this game, rely on their rushing attack and try and say, look, let's keep the Dolphins off the field. Let's do this drive sustain. That is not how they've played in recent weeks. I wonder if a lot of that has to do with Jalen Hurts is not the same runner as he was last year. This, like, even the eye test, I think, is pretty clear that he's not running in the same way. The data backs that up as well. Teams now respect the Jalen Hurts run less, which overall makes the rushing attack less effective. But I can see that game script happening. So I can see and look, would it be completely shocking if the Eagles, have a balanced attack and they hit a bunch of deep balls to AJ Brown and Devonta Smith? Also, no. But I think it's really game script dependent, and there are a lot of question marks there. What I don't think is a question mark is that the Dolphins offense is elite. And sure, to Drew's point, like, maybe they won't be number one by such a wide margin, but because of all the questions you're alluding to, and because of all this home field, like, that is the kind of counter narrative, which is allowing for the price to be at 2.5. And I just basically want to say, like, I want to be a week ahead, which is what happens if the Dolphins It's like all meaning I'm trying to project what I would think in a week from now. And at the end of the day, the thing I have the most confidence in of any football is unbelievably random, and you can only have so much confidence. I'm never going to be even close to like 75% sure that my angle is going to be likely. That's probably even too high. But the thing I am most confident in is that the elite offenses in the NFL are going to win. And that's the angle I want to play.
Interesting. So I would close it here with just to answer Sam's question. I think there's a pretty tight distribution on Eagles points. I think it's 27-31. And the distribution on Dolphins points, I think, is broader, because if the Eagles can play from ahead and shorten the game, and the Dolphins are a little shell-shocked and the Dolphins are impacted by the pass rush, then they could come in the teens. If the Dolphins are playing from ahead, if their game script is successful, and this is a game where the Eagles are in comeback mode, all game long, then they could get to mid-30s. They could get to the 40s. I mean, the Eagles defense is not good. Like, they're good. They have a very, very effective pass rush, particularly when Jalen Carter's on the field. Outside of that, like, they can be beat. So it's a big distribution here for the Dolphins, narrower distribution for the Eagles, I think, points wise. And I lean towards thinking that we could see a negative Z-score offensive performance from the Dolphins here, particularly relative to the data we've got from them this season, considering the spot they're in and the pass rush they're up against. But it's a weekend goal.
Okay, great stuff, guys. After all that, I'm nearly leaning towards Sam and the over, then maybe taking both guys. But you've got three strong opinions there. Take your pick. What should be a great Sunday night football? We will go to the 49ers at the Vikings. We'll take a look at the betting first that we have at Matchbook.com. The Niners are 1.34 favorites here. The Vikings 3.7 at home. They're getting a 7-point head start at 193. The total here is 44.0. Sam, over to you on this. Vikings best bet got up with the Bears after a rocky enough start, and I'd say rocky enough throughout the game, but they got the job done, and the defense in particular. But for you and the Niners, obviously having that shock defeat last week sort of gets them back to the pack a little, but you're happy to lay the points here, maybe lay 6.5 against the Vikings.
Yeah, I'm taking 6.5 just to kind of be slightly more conservative than going for the current line of 7. And I'll be honest, kind of when I first looked at the lines on Tuesday morning, I was a bit kind of unsure of where to go with this one. And I kind of looked back at that game, the Vikings game, and they just were flat out really quite bad at times against a pretty poor Bears team in general, but defense in particular. And I mean, that Bears defense has been shipping points for fun, and the Vikings couldn't really do what I thought they would do. And I thought even without Justin Jefferson, they would still have more than enough to be able to put up pretty good score. And they didn't manage to do it. And so when it came to this game, I think the Browns kind of really laid a bit of a blueprint, but ultimately there aren't many teams in this league that have the players to be able to kind of make that defensive plan work against the Niners. And certainly the Vikings are not one of those teams. So for me, we don't know what's going to happen with Christian McCaffrey or Deebo Samuel, but that doesn't really bother me a huge amount. I think this is an offense that has the ability to kind of, especially at running back in particular, seemingly kind of get any old guy off the street almost and make them semi-effective, even though they're obviously not going to be to the level of McCaffrey. And the more I looked at this, it came less down to what I thought that the teams would do on offense, and it came more down to what I thought they would do on defense. And the 49ers defense is an elite defense. And the Vikings just simply aren't. When you look at the stats, they're giving up 22.5 points per game. Either side of that are the Steelers and Green Bay, teams that you don't really want to kind of be associated with too much in this league. And I just think the Niners, this is a game they kind of need to really lay down a mark and get right ultimately. And I think we know that Kyle Shanahan has that in his locker, and ultimately, they're going to go and win this one quite easily, I'd suspect.
Okay, yeah. Jude, I understand you're probably a no bet on this one, but just set it up there before Drew comes in.
Yeah, this is a tough one for me. If you told me that all the Niners players were fully healthy, I would run with this line and say the Niners are going to kind of keep with their ways, scoring 30-plus points as they had up until the Cleveland game, and all of the areas in which I think Cleveland was successful. I don't think the Vikings can kind of replicate. That is, the Vikings are like 20th in pressure rate. The Browns are second. The Browns have an elite rush defense. The Vikings do not. But I think the Niners are pretty fragile once they start to lose a bunch of their weapons. And I think the sample size we've had of like basically since Purdy came back last year, it's like, oh, the Niners are like an absolute house. They're the best team. But if we look to like the previous 4 or 5 years before that, like there were a lot of holes. Let's not forget that they lost to the Bears in that week 1 game. There were tons and tons of these games where the Niners just come out absolutely clunky. And I think a lot of that has to do with the personnel on the field. So if I knew that Trent Williams was playing, if I knew that McCaffrey was playing, if I knew that Deebo Samuel was playing, I think the sample that's relevant is the one we've seen of the past, year since Purdy came back. There's like 15, 16 games or so. But I'm not so sure that's the sample that is actually present because of the injuries, which is having me lead off this game. On the Viking side, this is going to be the first time that the Vikings are playing at home in the Kirk Cousins era, and they are more than a 3.5 point underdog, which I think is pretty revealing of how far they the market has downgraded the Vikings. And obviously Justin Jefferson's loss matters, but I think they can kind of mitigate the things that the Niners do well. They can mitigate the pressure with O'Neal and Christian Darrisaw, who are maybe the best tackle duo in the league. Cousins will have time. They'll get guys open. I think a lot of what gets lost in talking about the Vikings is that Kevin O'Connell's actually a pretty good schemer. He has guys open. He forces coverage mistakes at a top 5 rate, which I think will kind of mitigate a bit of the Niners' matchup advantage. And 7 points is a lot. But again, the injuries at the end of the day is what is keeping me off betting this, especially on Wednesday.
Yeah, Drew, you identified where the Niners were in a bad spot last week against the Browns, came good in the long shots. This week, I'm guessing you're looking at a bad spot. Christian McCaffrey, incidentally, it looks like it's a pain injury, and from the reports I read this morning, it looks like he will play through that pain, but again, it's hard to know. And just on Sam's point, I did think at times the Niners looked okay, and it's almost like McCaffrey was playing once he went off injured, but I guess overall it is a downgrade for sure.
Yeah, I think the injuries are a downgrade for the Niners, and I think the situation, the travel, all of this is a bad spot for the Niners. I think the Niners that were transparent even in their, some of the press they've done, like they're looking ahead at the Bengals game. They know they have to deal with the Bengals on a short week at home, and they're probably devoting some of their prep this week to the Bengals game. So, there's kind of a number of things here that indicate to me this is not exactly a game the Niners are going to come in and try to bounce back and really lay a beating down on the Vikings. No, I think they'd like to get in and out with the win and keep their players healthy, if nothing else. And there's kind of like an underlying theme to almost every bet I've made this week, which is I'm trying to, outside of the Philly game, I guess, there's an underlying theme, which is that I'm trying to capture a little bit of an over adjustment off of the preseason priors that I think is present in this week 7 market at long last. For whatever reason, like through 6 weeks, all of the adjustments that were present in the market relative to preseason priors were all kind of influenced by quarterback injuries or other key player injuries. And I kind of agreed with everything that was going on. This week, it doesn't feel that way at all. It feels like we've really, really done some serious adjusting off of preseason priors and preseason, look ahead markets that I'm having trouble squaring. And this is probably the second most obvious one on the board, because this preseason look ahead market was Niners -1, and you can argue that was wrong. It should have been 3. Okay, fine. That still doesn't explain how we got all the way out to 7 here, and I'm really struggling to kind of figure out exactly what it is about the Vikings that you've seen so far. I get it. Justin Jefferson's not playing. I think they have perfectly fine talent to backfill there. I'm not exactly worried about Justin Jefferson being the distinguishing factor here, worth 6 points. And I think that the Vikings defense has shown you through 6 weeks so far that they're definitely better than they were rated preseason. I had this unit ranked bottom 5, like with a bullet, and not expecting them to be able to muster much of anything. They're performing right now in a neutral game state at a top 10 level. Their pass defense is significantly better than league average. Their rush defense is better than average. I think that they're getting higher quality of play out of their inside linebacking core, Jordan Hicks and Ivan Pace Jr., than I even came close to expecting. Danielle Hunter is still an absolute game wrecker. And then some of the weaknesses in the secondary that were super obvious have been either schemed around or just not exposed because of who they've played so far. So whatever the case is, I think the Vikings defense is not going to necessarily lay down here. I am concerned about some of the injuries for the Niners. Trent Williams matters the most to me. of those three guys, Samuel and Christian McCaffrey. It sounds like they're all three going to try to go, but again, with 2 weeks of travel and the kind of tricky spot they find themselves in, I'm not sure you're getting a positive performance here out of the Niners as a team. The Brock Purdy regression is starting probably. And I think the fact that he's up against a team that, can find innovative ways to generate pressure might be a factor, especially considering he's coming off of a game where he was under pressure, under duress for, all 60 minutes. And, there may be a little bit of kind of that in the back of his head in this game. So, the fundamentals are, I just can't get my numbers to support this being a 7-point spread for the Niners on the road. So I'm going to take the points and just hope that the market is giving me a free field goal here.
Okay, question marks over both teams here. Vikings +7 for Drew, 193. Niners -6.5, 185. The guys going head to head. Insights.matchbook.com. Full recap of all the guys' bets and the bets we're going to put up in the next few minutes. And we've got 1 million bets to get through in 10 minutes. So best of luck to all involved here, all four of us. So we'll start with Sam and Sam's Packers. Packers off a bye, and you're playing 2 bets at the Broncos.
Yeah, I am. And I can see there's going to be a bit of a confrontation about this one as well.
Yep.
But for me, I'm going to take Packers -1. Very simply, ultimately, I think it's going to be a bit of assuming Aaron Jones is back, which we don't know for sure at this point. I think it's going to be a bit of a run fest. And ultimately, this is purely because the Broncos are first in the league with points against per game, 33.3. And I think there's definitely a part of that is very inflated because of that Miami defeat. Broncos 0-3 at Mile High against the spread. I just don't think they're particularly good. And whilst I'm not totally sold on the Packers being particularly great either, I think they're the best of a bad bunch. But I'm more interested here in the over as well, which is 44.5. I'll take the over on that. I think these are 2 poor defenses that are going to be going head to head. And I just kind of want to, when there's 2 poor defenses on the field, and offensively, the Broncos haven't been dreadful. And I think the Packers definitely have potential as well. So I think we're going to see a very heavy kind of run game from both of them. And I think we're going to have a pretty high scoring game here ultimately, and one that the Packers should just about win. So I'm taking the Packers -1 and the over on 44.5. And the one other bet I'm going for this week, this is an absolute stinker. And I hate the fact I'm doing this, but Raiders at Bears. Raiders at Bears. What am I doing with my life? Why am I even looking at this? But the line sits at 37.5 right now, which is, I probably should have looked this up beforehand. I feel like it's definitely up there as being one of the lowest of the season so far. It's certainly the lowest of this week. And it looks like we're almost certain to have a bit of a backup fest. 2 backup QBs going head to head. Obviously, Brian Hoyer, a man that kind of lives and breathes the unspectacular, versus Tyson Bagent, who seems to, don't really know much about him, if I'm absolutely honest with you. He was at Shepherd Rams for 5 years, went 43-10, thrown over 17,000 yards, 159 touchdowns. I've kind of learned more about this guy in the last few days than I'd heard of him before, if I'm absolutely honest with you. But ultimately, I think the line is so low, and I don't trust either of these teams' defenses. The Bears are absolutely shocking. The Raiders, I don't think, are particularly great. And even, I think Brian Hoyer is, we know what he is now, not an NFL starting caliber quarterback, but he is kind of consistent. He will help his team put up points, even if it's only, 20 max. And Tyson Bagent there were some moments, for the Bears last week. There were some moments. I know he got an interception, got a rushing touchdown as well, but there were some moments where I thought, maybe you're not that bad. And I think there's times this season where it's been clear that the Bears could do with somebody that could actually throw a ball. And I think maybe he might actually have one of those kind of weirdly good games that you see from someone just thrown in at the deep end. We start to think maybe the Bears have got something, and then 2 or 3 weeks down the line, we realize they really don't. But I just think this is one of those games that everybody's expecting a stinker, a low scoring game. And when everybody's thinking one thing, I think often in terms of betting, especially in the NFL, it's quite often the smart thing to kind of go the other way. So for me, I'm taking the over on this, and I mean, it's going to be one I'm going to look at the result. I certainly will not be watching it.
6-9.
Yeah. Looking forward to this one. But anyway.
Over 37.5, 1-9. Raiders at Bears. Best of luck, Sam. Packers -1, 191, and over 44.5 in that game at the Broncos. Judah, anything you want to add on the Packers money line?
Yeah, I'll just say I think that the Broncos offense right now is being projected by the market around like the 16th best unit in the league. I think the more we learn about the teams they've played, I think that's probably a function of playing the Commanders, who all of a sudden are a bottom 5 defense, surprisingly. Playing the Bears, who are a bottom 5 defense. They've kind of struggled in spots against okay units. I think the Broncos are kind of average. And the one matchup thing I'll point to here is that Russell Wilson's EPA against the blitz is -0.5. That means he's losing his team about half a point every single time he faces the blitz. The Packers blitz at one of the highest rates in the NFL. I just don't see to add here. I don't see the Broncos as keeping up, especially with the offense that the market is pricing in right now. I think that the Packers coming off a bye are healthy. Their defense can't do anything to kind of force Love out of comfortable situations where he's been fine. I'm talking about clean pockets. I'm talking about pressure rates, things of that sort. The Broncos do none of that well. I expect the Packers running game to get a little bit going, especially if Aaron Jones is back. But really, the key here is I'm just going to be fading this angle that the Broncos are priced in as the 16th best offense when I think it's probably closer to 25th, 26th.
Drew, are the Broncos the 16th best offense in your opinion?
No, probably not. And actually, hearing the guys make the case for the Packers money line, I feel like I maybe missed the plot here, and I should just take an under 45.5 or 45, which seems like an awfully high number for for either of these teams. Getting to 24 seems like it's going to be a journey. My grades and just general feeling for Jordan Love right now is he could be the 32nd best starting quarterback in the NFL. I'm not seeing it at all that he is. There's not even really like flashes or moments where he's creating or doing things that really stand out on tape. And I am pretty convinced that the Broncos defense is a buy low still, with some of the important players getting back to full strength, most notably Justin Simmons. You basically have a relatively healthy secondary now for this Broncos defense going up against a super inexperienced wide receiving and tight end core for Green Bay, and a quarterback in Jordan Love who's wildly inaccurate. I think there could be some turnovers here that favor the Broncos, and I played Broncos money line even largely because I was like, again, preseason priors, the preseason look ahead here was Denver -3.5, and now here we are flipping them all the way to plus money on the money line, which I didn't get. So that was really why I fired. But now I think maybe a stronger angle would have been just to play the under and not watch this game.
Yeah, money line Broncos 208. Be a fascinating game. You've got a lot of angles in that one. We're short on time. Let's go to best week 7 long shots. And Drew, you're going to be taking on one of the guys' best bets here. We won't spoil that. But go on, Patriots. Look, we all know Bill Belichick Patriots. It's been a struggle in recent weeks. Why is now the time to get back on side with them?
Because they're getting 8.5 points.
Great answer. Great answer.
That's all I got, really. There's no matchup advantages, positives, anything here. But again, like preseason, this was expected to be Bills -2.5. At the time, if you had told me that this market was available and I could get high limit bet down, I would have said, take the Bills -2.5 and don't look back. Just because I thought it should be on the other side of 3. Should it be on the other side of 7? Considering the injuries that the Bills have sustained, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, absolutely not. Now you have injury questions swirling about Josh Allen and his effectiveness, and you have a Patriots team that is pretty desperate and does not look like they are trying to lose to me. I know Mac Jones has been absolutely atrocious so far this season, but the idea of him not having any kind of ability to operate a defense against this Bills, operate an offense against the Bills defense that is currently rostered is tough for me to wrap my head around. So I think the Patriots are going to move the ball. I think they're going to, keep this one competitive, frisky, and maybe we get the same sort of luck we got with the Browns last week and they actually win.
Okay, Patriots money line 4.3, Patriots plus 8.5 as well for Drew. Sam, take it away with the Browns. You want to lay -3.5, -5.5 at the Colts this week, so make the case.
Yeah, do you know what? I'm still absolutely reeling from that Jordan Love take. In a world where Desmond Ridder exists,
you are the Jordan Love man. You build.
I don't think he's amazing, but wow, okay. But we are going to talk about the Browns now. So Browns 3.5 points against the Colts in Indianapolis. I think I'm going to happily take this up to 5.5 if I can get it as well. I was just so impressed by the Browns. Obviously, there's kind of mixed messages about whether we're going to see Deshaun Watson this week or not. But ultimately, I think whether he's good to go kind of doesn't really matter. I'm happy to take the price now. And if he does play, fantastic. If he doesn't, then I'm still more than happy with this. The Colts, 8 turnovers in 3 defeats, just simply isn't good enough. Now facing an incredible Browns defense. Gardner Minshew, I actually think he's probably one of the better backup quarterbacks in the league, but any backup quarterback is going to struggle against the Browns defense. No Alex Pierce, who I think does a lot for them on offense. And I saw a stat that through 5 games for the Browns, they've only allowed 1,002 yards, which is the second least of any team through 5 games since 1971 with the Baltimore Colts, which is just an incredible stat that kind of really, really pays tribute to just how good they've been. And this is less about what the Colts can do. It's about what they're not going to be able to do. And I'm very confident we're going to see quite a strong Browns victory here.
Okay. Well, let's see. Minus Browns, -3.5. Judah, take it away. Your best long shot and best bets we both covered in the podcast. So maybe in about 30 seconds, why you're taking the Dolphins or laying the points with the Dolphins and the lines.
Yeah, laying the points with the Dolphins on the alt line, just because I think this game script can allow, as we talked about before, for the Dolphins to score, 42 points. And I think in that game script in which they, whether it's 42, 30, 35 or 31, whatever it might be, in that sort of game script, I don't think the Eagles can keep up. And on the Lions side, I'm trying to look at the fundamentals of each team. I would make the Lions a slight favorite here. I think that they are mispriced relative to the market, and I think the Ravens, as priced as like the 6th or 7th best team, is also mispricing. That I'm just going to kind of play that angle and take the Lions at 2.5.
Okay, we'll get the best bets records running through the screen. Records are getting very, very good and getting back to where we need to be. Let's go, Sam. Why is Drew way off? And there should be, even despite the priors of 1.5, 2.5 at the start of the season, it should be -8.5 here.
Yeah, I think I totally get the point about kind of looking at what they were kind of pre-season and kind of working out something in relation to kind of the line now. But I think at some element, you kind of just got to say that one team is far, far inferior to kind of what we thought they would be. And for me, the Patriots look absolutely terrible, genuinely atrocious in nearly every way. And they ultimately giving up 3 games. They've scored 20 points now, which is insane. In 3 weeks, 12 points per game is their average, which is absolutely ludicrous. They're 1-5 against the spread, 0-3 at home. And the Bills, whilst they are injured and they do have some quite big names out, you're looking at Flowers is missing, Judon is missing. You're missing big people on the Patriots side too. So I do think it's not kind of all one-way traffic in terms of injuries there. Mac Jones, what more could be said? The way Bill O'Brien was really trying to kind of shoehorn in Malik Cunningham really kind of tells you that what writing is probably on the wall there. They're desperate to try different things to kind of kickstart this offense in some way whatsoever, even if he's sort of becoming this almost Taysom Hill-like character. But I just think the Pats are so bad. And I hate saying it about a Bill Belichick team, but I just can't see them not getting blown apart here. Even though the Bills are not the team that they are when they're kind of healthy, they are a team that on offense can really kind of just put things together very, very quickly. So for me, yeah, I'm sorry, Drew, but I'm going to have to disagree wholeheartedly.
Drew,
we got an 8.5 point Polish middle, so let's go.
Drew, a lot of the commenters are calling you a madman for the Patriots money line. They called you a madman when the Commanders, you tipped them a 4.3 at the Eagles a couple of weeks ago. Should have won that game. Well, at least had the chance to win the game. The Steelers money line, and then obviously last week with the win, trying to remember off the top of my head, Browns money line. So they called you madman back then as well.
Got the Ravens. They had no business winning. I don't. I gotta mix in some terrible picks every now and then, or people think I have the script and I don't. So it is what it is. Am I up next?
Yes, take it away.
Okay. Going back to the well of my Steelers. 2 weeks ago, I said if they didn't show up for me, I was self-imposed banned from betting the Steelers ever again this season. I'm back on my my terrible takes here. I guess the Rams They were a great bet last week. I enjoyed every minute of that second half. That was a lot of fun. So much of the success felt like their ability to be, multi-dimensional and have a rushing attack that complemented the passing game there. And now in the absence of their two starting running backs, I really worry about, being a one-dimensional team facing a Steelers defense that can rush the passer. The key to kind of stopping Stafford from being his amazing self that we've seen throughout a lot of this season has been generating interior pressure on him. And the fact that you have now a Steelers D-line that's coming off of an extra week's rest and, playing on a fast field. All this really, I think, sets up well for that particular matchup to be the distinguishing factor of this game and this outcome. If the Rams are able to protect Stafford, he's going to utterly carve this Steelers secondary, which is fairly weak. And I think then this probably goes flying out the window. But the Steelers offense here has been kicked around pretty fairly for a lot of this season, but they have played some very, very, very bad defense and very, very tough defenses in some very bad spots. And I think now they actually get a Rams defense that has some places that you can pretty clearly attack them. And so with 2 weeks to prepare, I'm hoping Canada has these guys in a place at full strength where they can move the ball pretty effectively and be competitive here. So Steelers to win outright, I think, is the only way to play this. I'm not really interested in the points one way or the other, again, because if the D-line is not getting pressure, then I can see this one getting away from them. So don't really think you need, an special protection there by taking +3. I think you just play the money line or pass on this one.
Yeah. I'll let you come.
Sorry, Drew. I feel like I have to because I'm on the other side of the Steelers game, for the second week. If you want to talk about interior pressure, I think if anything that actually lends itself to the Ram side, right? It's Aaron Donald going up against probably the worst offensive line in football, certainly the one that's made the most blocking mistakes. And the strength of the Steelers is with TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. I don't think Larry Ogunjobi and Montavious Adams is really worrying the Rams too much. And I think it adds to your point, which is like if you can kind of mitigate the pass rush, the Stafford in this offense should absolutely carve up the Steelers secondary. And I think they'll be able to generate enough quick separation to do exactly that. That I certainly have some caution on the Steelers side, and I do like the Rams
I honestly struggled to find a best bet this week. I left it blank for quite a while, so I was like, I don't know. I kind of hate all these. So
I took the cop out and just went with the Lions one that I had earlier.
Sam.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to hop on with Drew here. I can't quite bring myself to do that, but I think Deontay Johnson being designated to return from IR could be a big positive for the Steelers. So yeah, maybe just a little kind of sprinkle of hope there for me.
Yeah, I really just need Sean McVay's baby to get here any day now and him to miss the game. That's really what I'm counting on.
Comment of the season so far from Chase. The Patriots win. He'll do an apology video tribute to Drew. We will call you out on that next week.
I'm due for some regression, so I'm prepared I'm prepared to grovel next week about how bad my picks were this week. No worries.
They've called you madman before, Drew, and they'll call it again. We went 3-0 on best bets, despite everything, believe it or not, last week. It's Bills -8.5 for Sam, Lions -2.5 for Judah, and Drew going with Steelers money line best bet. So maybe that'll be a nice treble. Do check out the Matchbook Betting Exchange. Invariably, we're best price on the odds checker grid throughout the UK. So invariably, you will be getting the best price on that treble if you want to just have a fun one for Red Zone and beyond. My thanks to Drew, Judah, Sam. Favorite episode of the series. We'll be back next week. Take care. Bye-bye.